for being here. It is such an honor to see your faces, to see the joy that we all bring to the screen. As I was telling our audience that got on earlier, my grandchildren are here, my daughter's here, my son-in-law is here, and they're just so special. And in this book, most of all, they taught me happiness. Robert talks so much about the family, how much the family meant to him, and how the family was the foundation of who he became and what he did. And then I found this copy as I was cleaning up a desk. And here are the words that Robert wrote. You see how Robert was always scribbling on everything? It didn't matter. And this is what he said. I read 4 chapters of this book, dating back to an awakening in the night, pages 91, 102, 106, and others. And what I realized was this book has become essential for my age, 83 and a half. Mentioned in my speeches, I will continue to tell people, decide to be happy. And then he wrote, remember the 94-year-old lady who said to me that she adored this book every day and read it faithfully and was so happy to finally meet me in Solvang, a little village just up the hill from Santa Barbara. And we were there, and she said, are you the Robert Muller that I read about every day? And most of all, they taught me happiness. Talk about being in the right place at the right time. And then he wrote to Barbara today, 13 January 2007. I must smile to her. She gives me so much happiness, and I love her immensely. You see, what came to his mind was what he would write as he was reading, as he was thinking, so that now here I am. It was 2007 to 2023. I'm reading what he wrote. And I've always been careful not to write in books, and I stopped that. Now I write in the books what I'm thinking so that somebody will see what I was feeling as I was reading these books. And he put in here a thought for today from Martha Washington. I am determined to be cheerful and happy in whatever situation I find myself, for I have learned that the greater part of misery or unhappiness is determined not by the circumstances, but by our disposition. So that's what I thought I'd share before I introduced my dear friend, David Wick. You all know him, and many of you are here because of David Wick. David Wick has this incredible personality that reaches out with joy and peace. And he's like a magnet. You know, think about being an international city of peace with Fred Armand. Think about creating a culture of peace with Ambassador Chaudry. Think about being on peacepodcast.org with Barbara Muller. Think about all the things that this man has done. And I think that one of the most special is he was a very dear collaborator with Avon Madison, starting Pathways to Peace. He lives in Ashland, Oregon. He was the president of the Rotary E-Club of World Peace. He has been such a good friend. Whenever I have an idea, I call up David and say, David, what do you think about this? And what does David say? I love it. or he said, what about this? And then we have this collaboration. So without further ado, because today is a very important day to hear from you, we want to allow enough time for each of you to tell us that favorite passage. And I hope you saw in my email today that the next meeting will be July 9th. And that was because we know that July 4th is a busy holiday for so many people. So the next one will be July 9th. And with that, it is an honor. It is a pleasure. It is a overwhelming joy that I say, David Wick, may I welcome you on behalf of all of us. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much, Barbara. You're very generous with your introduction and your praise. Thank you. And I feel the same with you. It is such a sweet pleasure, honor of life to be walking the peace building path with you. So thank you very much. And also sharing this about Robert. As I mentioned before, that there are times when Robert and with Barbara, and other times when I've been together with him, and always been very inspired by him, particularly when we were in San Francisco at various activities. And today, moving into this is a journey together. I'm not going to be here telling stories. I'm going to help move us into the stories that Robert shared with us. And these are all situations where he is telling us what he learned, what he experienced, which again helped him. With most of all, they taught me happiness. These are all lessons or insights from his life about learning, about the values that he holds. And so this is a journey together. And there's a lot of material here, obviously. So to do this in a way that makes sense, what I like to do is with each section, each chapter, is that I'll read some of the excerpts from this to open this up for us, and then ask all of us what other excerpts would we want to share, and what is going on with this chapter? What is he telling us? What does this mean to us as we're experiencing this? And just move through this together. And then I'd also like to have this kind of opens up to a time when we can also share who in our lives inspired us. What are situations in our lives that really we learned from others that were really seminal in bringing us to where we are today, so we can share our story also. And as Barbara mentioned, other quotes or excerpts from Robert's journey here. So, and we'll see how this goes. If it's not working, then it'll shift gears and we can do something a bit different. And some of the pronunciations, if I get that wrong, please correct it, and so we have it right. So I'm just going to go ahead and begin at the first one, and we'll just move through the different chapters. But again, this is for, he's just not published a book. This is for our learning. And that's the point, is sharing what we've learned, what this means to us, as we go through his wisdom. So I'm just going to go ahead with the first one, with Pierre. We need to be needed. Service to others can give us a new purpose in life. One has sometimes the good fortune of meeting in life one of those rare human beings who are able to convey to their fellow men in a very short time a forceful, unforgettable message about the basic human truth. Among such persons, I will never forget the French priest, Pierre. His message was that man's greatest need was to be needed by others, to be of service to others. Nobody, I thought to myself, should ever be allowed to fall as low as not to be needed by someone else. Hope and joy come back to my life when we both found disciples of Emmaus, an association of outcasts, the desperados, and former criminals. This cause gave us new purpose in life, and we came to health, happiness, and faith. And Father Pierre had said, poverty is still an immense frontier on this planet. We must help the young to be of help to others, to make this world a beautiful place. Thus, many years before nations became aware of of the youth problem, Pierre had a premonition of it. He started the first Peace Corps, composed of young Swedes whom he sent to work in the slums and shantytowns of Latin America. It is high time to establish compassion, love, care, and mutual help at the center of the world relations, as we do in our families, in our cities, and in national affairs.
David, everything you're reading is what I underlined as I was reading. It's amazing. And I'll bet you guys found this, you people found the same thing. And I'll bet you what, now let me hear the next thing, because I'll bet you it was the last line, but let me hear.
Okay, well, this is the great lesson that Pierre left with me. From that day on, it became a religion of public service, of work not based on mere intelligence, knowledge, skill, and reward, but on the heart, feeling, commitment to doing good and to being of service to others.
Right on.
So what is this? What stands out to us? What is he talking about? What is the overarching message here? And why don't we just, when you want to respond or say something, just do raise the hand of the reaction, so make it easy in that way.
Well, the thing that came to me is we need to be needed. We need to be needed.
Anyone else? What are your thoughts? What stood out for you, or any other quotes from this? Oh, Penny.
Stood out for me was he was Hungarian. I mean, I'm Hungarian. And so there was things that made me immediately aware of this beauty of this Abbe Pierre, and to realize that when you are needed, you give a new purpose in life. You receive a new purpose in life, right, David? Because look how needed you are.
And Penny had something. You just raise your hand. So yeah, we're small enough here.
And if not, we'll just go right on.
Unmute, please.
There we go. I think that is the heart of humanity, is definitely to be needed. As a hypnotherapist, I've experienced many, many questions on what is my purpose? What do I do now that I'm retired? And so often is where am I needed? And as soon as they can find that, it's just the light comes back, the purpose comes back, and the service becomes joy. So I totally feel for this particular piece where he says that. I think the heart is everything. When the heart just can continue to open you and beat, otherwise it stops.
And this is also where one of the first places, at least in these sections, where he's talking about the heart and talking about and that is throughout. As we'll see, is throughout the coming back to the heart. Joanne, please.
It makes me think of situations where you feel helpless and suddenly you are called upon to do something. Like there you are in a hospital bed, but the person next to you really needs help and they can't reach, they can't do something, or you can call the nurse for them, or two prisoners in a cell, where suddenly they realize it's not me. My gosh, this person really, I can really help this person at this point. And I think that those situations are amazing because suddenly their whole attitude changes.
Right.
That's how important that is.
For sure. Yeah, Marilyn. Hi there. Yeah, unmute, please.
Thanks, sweetie. Lovely to be with you and with so many people I love and care about. What it made me think was how important it is to remember to acknowledge someone else's contribution so that they see that they're needed, that they see that what they did is actually important and is recognized.
Right on. Yeah, for sure. Well, terrific. All right. Thank you. Well, let's move on. The next is the advice of a general. Life must be planned in a harmonious whole. Old age must be visualized at an early stage. Often when I pondered about the meaning of life, an old scene comes back to my memory. General Koenig and Lance. Now, how do you pronounce this one? Aslantian. That's where he's from. The community who had joined de Gaulle to fight the Germans in Africa and later became the commander-in-chief of the French underground forces. It struck us further that here was a man rendered exceptional by the quality of his inner happiness. The unique marriage of strength and happiness in this man left an indelible impression on us. Would you allow me to give you advice? It would be this: prepare yourself well in your old age. Try to see your entire life right from now, and plan the fulfillment of one sole objective: happiness and contentment throughout your existence, and especially at the end of it. This has earned us a profound contentment and peace. Every experience, good or bad, was a building block towards the edifice still to be erected at the end. Life is indeed man's most precious possession. It would be planned as a harmonious whole and managed with no less than the bank account or a career. Life must be made the objective of a strategy. Great truths have strange ways of surfacing in any place on life.
You did it again. You read
So-
exactly what I underlined as I was reading. Especially great truths have a strange way of surfacing in any place on earth. Great truths. And that's what I feel when I look at all of you. You possess these great truths and they come out exactly when somebody needs them. Thanks, David.
Right. So any thoughts on this? And also you're talking about, old age must be visualized at an early stage. How many of us do that or did that? I didn't.
I didn't, but I had a kind of an inner voice talking to me. Is this really what you want to do? And don't you want to do that? But I didn't. And yet I have enormous happiness and contentment now. So part of it I kind of feel there's an organic side to this. And if we follow our own inner voice and we know what the next step is, we don't always have to know what the end step is going to be. I mean, that's my experience anyway. And then it always seems to work out.
Great. Other thoughts on this, on how you have lived your life coming to our more senior years? Yes, Rosemary.
Yeah, the way, having been an educator most of my life, I look at the life as in trimesters, and being that I am in my final trimester on this planet, I realize, and not from a negative standpoint, but realize I have less days, hours, minutes left than what I've already experienced. So having said that, to be able to use what one has learned over the course of the first 2 trimesters to be in service to oneself and through that to others has been a delight for me to discover at this stage of my life.
Yeah.
And I'll just finish by saying, being bilingual, the Spanish word for to be, which is ser, S-E-R, isn't it curious that it's the root, or at least when you spell it out in English, of service? So it's basically being oneself and offering it to the world. And as was said earlier, where you see need, go for it. Just do it, as Nike says. Thank you.
Beautiful. Great. Thank you, Rosemary. Yes, Jerry, and please unmute.
You're muted, Jerry. I don't know if she.
Jerry, please unmute. I can't hear you.
Let me see if
cannot
I
hear
can
you.
unmute her. Jerry. Jerry, you're muted. Let's see if we can do.
Go ahead.
There you go.
Okay.
Hello.
Now we got it.
Sorry. Can you hear me now?
Uh-huh.
Yes.
Okay. Well, thank you, David, for that concept. I've always thought about Robert that whatever truth he spoke, he was a perfect example of it himself. And right now I'm writing a book of poetry called Journeys of Elderhood. And as the poems come flowing out, I'm beginning to realize, of course, I can't do what I used to do. And sometimes that's very frustrating when the task seems so monumental. But I think that the issue of elderhood is that because we are wiser than we were, we don't flop around so much when we go strategically and directly to where we're going. And so I think that we have to sort of take advantage of this Amazon spirit. And when you are of service, which is what you were just talking about before, so many needs come to you that you may have just overlooked before. And later on, perhaps I'll get a chance to tell you a story about a refugee young woman that we're trying to bring to Canada. And we're working so hard. But I think that the thing about elderhood is not only that we're wiser and more strategic, but here's the idea. We're not as dynamic and vigorous as we were before. But if you open a crack, that's where the light comes in. Mm-hmm. And my thoughts about Robert is that he was continuously projecting this light as long as he lived. And of course, Barbara would know the most about that.
Thank you.
So thank you for that.
It's gone. It's in the books right there. You're right, Jerry.
Right. Beautiful. Thank you very much. Yes, Richard.
Thank you very much, David and Barbara. I decided to become a medical doctor in grade 5, and then worked all my way up to accomplishing that. Then I decided that I should get married and raise a family, and that then took place. Now I'm retired, but I think that life is lifelong learning. And so I've now become our Rotary District Governor, and that has certainly been a learning curve for me. And I think, again, to look at life as, continual learning now, to me, I don't see this as a final age group, but to me, it's just part of living, and that we need to keep on doing it. What I find is when I go cycling now, I still do it. I'm just a little slower. I used to be able to do 22K an hour. Now I'm probably around 18K an hour. So, but you just got to keep doing it.
Beautiful. Thank you, Richard. That's right on. Yes, Barb.
Where'd Barb go?
Hello, you disappeared.
Barb, let me see.
Hello.
She's still there. Oh, her Zoom here. I put her Zoom back. She had closed your Zoom down. Let me try to get her back on.
There you go.
Here I am.
She is. Hi, Barb.
Hi, I'm new to this group. Thanks to Barbara Muller inviting me to it.
Mhm.
And I may be cheating with my answer to this question, but one of the things that struck me throughout the book was Robert's way of identifying people, of describing people. And when he described General Koenig, he had the peasant and the general all combined in that paragraph about him. And it made me think a lot about another sort of common person who was a general that was our president, Dwight D. Eisenhower, right at the same time that all this happened. And I have written a book on women peacemakers, but I've put a bunch of quotes in it by different people. And I just wanted to read a quote that I thought about when I read this part of his book. And talk about how it's inspired. I think it would have inspired even Robert. It says, I like to believe that people in the long run are going to do more to promote peace than our governments. Indeed, I think that the people want peace so much that one of these days, the governments had better get out of the way and let them have it. And I've been so impressed by reading this book about how many people created the United Nations. Not only the people that created it, but their mentors and the mentors of them. And it's almost like governments just get in the way in some ways.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to commend Robert for his exquisite about the English must have been his fourth language, fifth language, something like that. But his use of English in this book is so moving to me.
Yeah, beautiful.
And this book was published originally by Doubleday, and it was published in 1978. And then we realized these messages are as powerful today as they were when he wrote them. And Margarita was his first wife, and she said, Robert, why are you writing these stories instead of the history of the United Nations? He said, people are going to write about the United Nations, but I need to write about the people who made me who I am today. And that's how he answered her. And then his beautiful daughter, Giselle, after he wrote the manuscript, edited it. And she's one of the top marine biologists on the planet. And she did this from the point of view of species living together. And you can feel that, the species living together, the energy that it took for Robert to leave Alsace-Lorraine. And then who did he meet along the way? And so now, Father de Brevery and Thayard, can you imagine, David? Your turn.
Yeah.
Well, go ahead. Go ahead, Barbara. And with this, why don't you just talk about this section with Father Brevery and Thayard? Your thoughts.
Dave, Thayard always was important, period. And when he came from his Chinese imprisonment with Father de Brevery, and they were tortured and fed little food, and he thought he was going to die, they never lost hope. And so when Father de Brevery came to the United Nations, I remember Robert telling me that Father de Brevery was one of the smartest men he ever met. And he was a chain smoker because he had so many pains and things that didn't go right from his imprisonment. But it never affected Thayard. Thayard never made that part of his story. He just let it be. And then he went on. And when he did what he did, he had these enlightenments. Thayard had these enlightenments. And Robert and he put together the Thayardian enlightenments, and it's in one of his books. And then when it became Thayard's biography time, they interviewed Robert to see his relationship between Thayard and Father de Brevery, because Robert, as somebody said earlier, always wanted to know what made a person tick. He would ask the questions about what is it that makes you passionate about what you're doing. And that's exactly how Thayard. And Thayard de Chardin was a key person for Jean Houston. I don't know if you know that, but Jean was a little girl when Thayard de Chardin was a New Yorker, and he was in the park. And one day he was interviewed by the New York Times, and Jean Houston at the age of 12 said, "That's my Thayard." She had a little nickname for him. And she said, "I didn't know I was talking to him." And then that's the story that most people don't know. And yet when you go into the stories about Thayard and Father de Brevery, who they both lived together. And all I can say is I admire Robert for finding out who people were before they found out who he was. Thank you, David.
Great, thank you, Barb.
Again, you're muted.
Unmute.
I'm just thinking that the paragraph on the next to the last page of that chapter about Thayard saying the future is in solar energy, that's kind of mind-blowing. That was able to be written in 1978. And
Read that again so we can hear it again.
It says, Mon père, somebody will understand that the sun, and only the sun, from which most other forms of energy are derived, is our great clean source of energy. Among the civilizations in the universe, the Earth is a very primitive one, since it uses the energy of its own planet. Others utilize the energy of their sun, and still others harness the energy of the cosmos. You must take a very long-term view, a view of hundreds of thousands of years, and prepare the minds of the political leaders to think in terms of solar energy.
Can you believe that?
In 19 what, 60, 70, whatever that was.
No, this is before 78 because he wrote the book in 78. So that was the early 70s when Teilhard said that.
Yep. And we're just now beginning to figure that out.
There's so much that we're appreciating about this book. Isn't that right, Barb?
Yep, very much, I think.
Yeah, they're very definitely wonderful. Anyone else thoughts on that chapter? Yes, please, Penny.
That was exactly the quote I picked out for the same reason, because it really shows the visionary possibilities that were in totality as well as individuality. And I think what impressed me throughout the entire book of Robert's writing was the brilliance with the heart combined all along, and the experience, because of having to deal with such a critical time in history and do it with compassion and still have the intelligence to function within all the dynamics of the differences.
Right.
To bring wholeness within a diverse population takes incredible skill, but it also takes, I believe, a highly developed intuitive sense that can process, whether it's in the dream state or other altered states, to bring that information, such as this quote, forward. Where did he get that, I wonder? But it was the exact one I had.
Yeah, good point.
Right. Yeah.
Good comment. Mike.
Yeah, the thing that kind of really hit me on this about the chapter about Teilhard was Teilhard saying, well, you have to have patience, just wait another 500,000 years. And it's kind of hard to think of doing that.
Yeah.
And even Robert saying, well, it's going to take less than 100 years. What just strikes the chord to me is Martin Luther King's statement that it's either going to be nonviolence or non-existence.
That's a big statement.
Right. Yeah, well said. Yeah, very true. All right, well, let us move on. The next is the example of a great ethical statesman, Thant, and which is very interesting. And I did not know. This is revealing the different chapters of Robert's role at the UN and the people that played an important role for him. And I did not know about this with Thant, and obviously it was a major influence with Robert. So I'll just read a couple excerpts from this, but there's a lot here about Thant. So I'll just go ahead and begin in the top here. Man can learn so much by simply opening himself to others, by lowering the barriers of his self-sufficiency and infallibility. When I worked for him, Thant was, for me, not only the Secretary General of the United States, but also a master in the art of living. Kindness, love, and understanding for his fellow humans were his sole motivation. Discipline and self-control were his ways. True faith led me close to him, his gentle teachings and his faith. You're expected to solve problems and not create them, was a comment from Thant to Robert, and when he was in conflict with one of his colleagues. Thant, he was also told, Thant wishes you to understand the solution rests between you. So Thant was not stepping into a situation and giving the answer. He was expecting Robert and one of his colleagues to work it out, to figure this out. I began to grasp one of his basic beliefs, namely that truthfulness and understanding are two of the most important pillars of a peaceful and orderly society. But it was spirituality that brought me close to the beautiful soul of Thant. Thant was really at his best when he spoke about faith and ethics. People he liked and admired most were religious leaders, humanists, and great artists. This he talks further about Thant, and who's Buddhist, and that was his practice. And there says, this is Buddhism at its best. This is Thant at his best. I have never forgotten this lesson, which has enriched my life immensely. Thant was right. Man can learn so much by simply opening himself to others, by lowering the barriers of self-sufficiency and infallibility. Relax your defenses, give access to the opinions, aspiration, knowledge, and love of others, and you will broaden yourself incredibly. After a while, one becomes a crossroads in the essence of others, and consequently, a more profoundly integrated member of the human society. Indeed, how can we reach full consciousness and enlightenment if we do not let the entire world and humanity enter ourselves? Humility and the lowering of one's ego lead to the end to righteousness, happiness, and the fulfillment and the full mastery over oneself, enriched by the thoughts, dreams, and feelings of others. Together with meditation, it is perhaps the clue to serenity in our bewildered, complex world. The thought was a living proof of it. I'm going to go right to the end section.
Well, Thant meant a lot to Robert.
Pardon
Thant meant a lot to Robert.
Yeah.
Robert said he
Go ahead.
probably was the most influencing person in his life. That's why he devoted 2 chapters to Thant. The second, as soon as this chapter of David is done, then we go to the 4 Roads to Happiness by Thant. Thant believed that if you listen and if you become who you are, the roads shall meet. Listening and being who you are will open up the door, as you said, to the new chapter. Anyway, David, Thant, I'll just give you one story and then we'll go into what people found. Thant always believed that people could solve their problems. And so when the 2 ambassadors came to him one day and said, Thant, you have to solve this problem. We're going to have a world war. And he said, why? Why are you going to have a world war? Well, there's some disagreements. And he said, well, go out in the hall and don't come back until you've settled it. He believed in the human nature of doing the work yourself. He sent him out in the hall, and Robert said, you sent him out there and there's a world war imminent? He said, yeah, they'll come back with a solution because I won't let them in until they have one. And that's the kind of wisdom that Thant brought to Robert. And there's so many stories that Robert shared about using common sense, having that conversation, paying attention. And David, keep going, please.
Well, no, let's just continue the conversation and thoughts about this with Thant, and also with his 4 roads to happiness. I'm not going to read from that. That's so rich. There's so much there that you'd have to really read it to get into it ourselves. But anything that they would like to reflect on both of these chapters about Thant, and what stands out, and also it's like, what is of value, meaning? What is Robert telling us? What is he sharing with us that is important for us to know? Yes, Joanne.
I kept on thinking, I think this was the section where they're talking about the importance of the physical, the intellectual, the moral, and the
Right.
spiritual, right?
Right.
And I think what was most profound there was his acknowledgement that Western culture has prioritized the intellectual at the expense of the moral and the spiritual, and how wrong that is. And boy, I think in today's world, I mean, that is, and we believe that everybody in the world should follow that path rather than, but we have something to learn from people who have a different approach. And we're slowly getting there. And but how profound that is. It's sort of like, the football mentality, have you got to win? Oh, no, you don't have to win. I mean, what's the big deal about that? You have to get along and survive and see each other and love each other.
Right.
So,
Yeah, absolutely. Yes. Other thoughts or reflections on these two chapters and what stood out for you?
But building on what Joanne said, Robert would tell me that U Thant would say to him, you Catholics, you're spiritual on Sunday. Us Buddhists, we're spiritual 24/7. We're always spiritual. Our life is a spiritual existence. And Robert would say, what? There's so much to learn from you.
Exactly.
And all of that's there. It's right there.
Yeah, Jerry, please.
And as you read this book, there is a logic to it, because then he goes into something about simplicity. There's nothing that we can't explain simply. And I remember when Robert went to the U Thant to become his assistant, and he said, what are your three dreams? What have you unfulfilled? What is unfulfilled? And the one was he needed a spiritual voice at the United Nations. And that's when Robert brought the Pope to the UN. And so the spirituality that Joanne brought up was really key to Robert's later development. It wasn't in his early days when he was getting his PhD in economics or in political science or something like that. As he evolved in the United Nations, his spirituality became his mentorship with U Thant, turned him into a spiritual being.
Right, Jerry.
One of the things I'm hearing from everybody is really, really important, and that is Robert's belief that it will be people power that will that will save the day. And I'd just like to share from the point of view of a neuropsychologist that as we evolve, that's when we become open to all that we can become. And that's when spirituality opens up to its fullest. That when you're young and focused on getting a degree or doing your job or raising children or whatever, it doesn't necessarily come to the fore. What's so interesting in the work that Des and I are doing is that we're looking at a whole incredible group of evolved human beings, and they are elders, and we are feeling and we are saying now that it's our job, it's our generation to somehow share this wisdom.
Mm-hmm.
The sharing of this evolved wisdom is the most important thing we have to do, and each of us comes at this from a whole lifetime and from a different direction. And what people are also saying is that Robert exemplified and really raised the flag for is, look, you guys, we have to work together. It really doesn't matter where you're coming from. We have a problem in front of us. We need a solution, and not one of us has the solution. We need to work together. So I think I'm hearing something really important in what you've brought up, David, and the contributions that everybody is making. I'm particularly interested in what Barbie was saying earlier in the quote, that it's going to be people and not government. And I think that as we confront the bureaucracies of our Canadian government, which is probably, one of the easiest in the world, because we're talking to the office of the Prime Minister, we're actually talking to him. But the bureaucracy is standing in our way in so many ways from doing good work. But as soon as you ask an ordinary person who is this kind of evolved human being, you get a whole bunch of yes. Yes, I can. Yes, I can. And the contributions that people are making in their elder years are astounding. They are astounding. So again, I think that there's no one more inspiring in the world, I think, than someone who gives the kind of examples that Robert does, and you, Thant, and Teilhard de Chardin, and they're all saying the same thing. It's people power, you guys, and we have it. And so don't ever forget that it's also our job, because these crises happened under our watch. And whether we cause them or not.
I see Jim's hand too, David. Jim.
Yeah.
Paul.
Yeah, I know. Yeah. So yeah, Jim, please.
Yeah, I think these pages of Thant are so all-inclusive of everything, and there is so much in these. But one jumped out of me, and part of this, and it's part of honoring everybody, and it's part of acknowledgement that where Thant says, most of my visitors have something specific to say to me. I must open myself to them. I must empty myself of myself. William Ury talks about being in the balcony. In many of my communication classes, I talk how to be the third party to your own communication. How can you step out of your everyday existence? The fun part of this also was that it seemed to be such a basis for Robert, because in the page 162, where the heading was always place yourself in the position of your human brothers, that importance of being open to the others. Even yet later, he talks about the Indian prayer of walking the mile in another's moccasins. That importance of listening from that third party, that ability to hear, that ability to make the other person know they are heard. It's not a matter of standing and saying, I hear you, but it's that recognition to that depth that we so rarely achieve as we're focused into our own moment.
Beautifully said. Great. Thank you, Jim. Yes, Lydia.
Thank you, David, and thank you, everybody. It's wonderful to be back, Barbara. I need to be on your mailing list because I dropped off or something, and Rosemary let me know about this. So thank you, Rosemary. I love this book. And what I would say, Jerry, building on what you said, is I'm so grateful that much of my life has been really listening to elders, Native American elders particularly, and doing whatever I can to help them meet with each other and meet with everybody, unity and diversity, through the Peace Village in Vermont that I'm on the board of. And one of the things that I love about my Native relatives is the fact that we use the talking stick. And I am retired from academe, and so I'm really resonating deeply with this book because, like Robert, when I retired from academe, I answered a prayer, how could I do something that could really matter and be of service? And as a result, I'm writing a book helping people, including Indigenous elders, tell their stories that have helped Venerable Dahani Wahu, the founder of the Peace Village, and who is also the carrier of 3 intact spiritual lineages, Native American and Buddhist. And she, everything that you're saying and that Robert is saying is such a primordial truth that we find when we go back to the ancients, we find when we go to the Indigenous, and we find when we go to the Buddhists. There's such a universal truth here about compassion and kindness and love. So I love the way that I was lucky enough, Barbara, to go to Costa Rica and be at the university when Robert's centenary, as you know, and he just beamed. I felt as though he was alive in the room. And there's this whole idea of the crack with the light shining through. You know, we all have that light in us. And these are the people that you're citing, David, through Robert Robert's book, that remind us that there's a certain presence where we are light. And, you know, Teilhard de Chardin was, Jean is impressed by very few people in her life. I've worked with Jean pretty closely, and he really marked her life, So anyway, those are, I just wanted to say I'm grateful to be here. I'm recovering from surgery, so I don't have my setup the way I should with my lights on and everything, but I love being here. And this is such an important conversation.
Thank you.
How do we
Thank
live
Beautiful.
peace? How do we live peace, and positive peace, not peace with the idea that the absence of war, but peace without war. We don't have to have war on this planet.
Good for you. You're in the chat. There is a link to this new course, Ending War 101, in the chat. Everybody get on that course. Helen, you're next.
Well, gee, Barbara. Having been the editor of that course, first of all, I want to say that this whole chapter spoke to me. That I've been studying Buddhism most of my life, and this whole chapter spoke to me. And to know that we had a Secretary General of the UN who embodied Buddhist principles in such a wonderful way is inspiring for me. Usually when I meet people like that, they're nuns or but I was sort of curious what you would all say about, I am not in a place of deep contemplation right now. I'm freshly back from, how many Canadians are in this group? Because there are a few of us. Okay.
There's 3.
Yeah, so my question would be, or my thought would be, yes, positive peace. And yes, as we get older, we are embodying, we have a lot more wisdom. We surely do than we did when we were 20.
Say
And
episode 7 about Robert.
Yes, I did.
Oh,
Here it is.
but say the name of the interview.
I did.
I can't
Yeah.
figure that.
so Des, can I just finish what let me
I
just
want to
finish.
hear Ellen. Yeah, keep
Yeah.
going.
So I have put a tremendous energy into this new course called Ending War 101. And I do believe that there's a place for us to look at what we need to be doing to shift our planet away from the choice of war as a means of resolving conflict. And to be able to do that, we have to be able to turn around and look at the institution of war itself, and the thinking and the processes and the structures and the organizations that are allowing war to continue. We've had 250 wars since the UN was formed to save us from the scourge of war. And so my question is this: I'm freshly back from traveling to Ottawa, our nation's capital, to participate in a protest against something called CANSEC. Des, have you guys heard of CANSEC?
No.
No. This is the largest trade show in North America for the military. And delegations come from around the world to buy tanks and machine guns and every variation of what is needed for the military. So the protest that we did, I thought was amazing. Groups came from various backgrounds, and we delayed the opening address of our governor, of our Secretary of Defense, our Minister of Defense, by an hour. We backed up the traffic by 2 kilometers in either direction, all non-violently. And for me, it was to be able to kind of look in the eyes and try and start conversations with the people who were engaged in this whole exercise. So where is the role, I guess, of that? The corporate media did not give it one word. Not one word. And they reported the full address of the Minister of Defense about the creativity of the people in the room and the problem-solving skills that they were bringing to this huge conference.
Interesting that you bring that up now, because as you heard, Secretary General Thant felt wars were absolutely unnecessary and that we didn't need to do anything except have a conversation. And the end of that statement that I made earlier was the war did not happen. They settled it in the hall. And that's what you're talking about, Helen. But you're really talking about a much deeper dive into why we tolerate war. And I don't think Secretary General Thant would be very happy tolerating war today. So with that, I'm going to move on. Be sure you keep the chat today. Click those 3 buttons at the bottom. Join us for this Ending War 101. And David, I'm going to have you continue, please. Helen, please speak again. David?
Alrighty. So Helen had one more thing you wanted to say, and then we'll move ahead. Okay, we'll just go ahead then. Alrighty. So then the other, and we want to move quickly through, well, we'll move as we do, but we're coming towards a half an hour of time left. So the one on simplicity, there's nothing on earth that cannot be explained simply. The more I live, the more I am convinced that specialization, expertise, and scientific jargon are often just a means of gaining supremacy over others. Again, in this respect, I received a most salutary lesson from Thant. I'm just going to go right to the end here. However specialized a person may be, for the sake of his own happiness and achievement, he must always remain a warm, passionate being with both mind and heart wide open to all streams of life and knowledge. His aperture must range from the infinitely small to the infinitely large. His heart must embrace all peoples, race, and living creatures on earth. So just open this up to thoughts about the simplicity. Basically, he's saying about, and you thought through this chapter and other things, they're saying it is a simple comment, it's a simple statement. Don't speak in complex words. You have to speak directly to people and to the heart. Again, this comes back again to the values, to the heart of communication, not being
Page 141, right there, just what you said, David. I had to subdue the intellect to turn on the heart.
Right. So any thoughts about this section?
That's why his speeches were so good, because he really did know everything about the UN, but that isn't what he spoke. He would be very quiet in the beginning, and that's why he played his harmonica, because he knew that if he played the harmonica, the heart would open. The heart would hear. He would be able to speak from his heart. And that ode to joy was his model for everything. He was joyful no matter what. And what I got out of this was, as simple as a speech could be, or as complex, he always went for the simple. If he could explain it in 4 or 5 words, that's what he did. He didn't go into, I have a degree in economics and this is what the book said. No, he said, if you want to be wise, you want to be smart, just save a few dollars and save it for your future. Don't spend all of your money today and don't spend all of your wisdom. Be there now. So there you go. I mean, simple things that we can emulate. And there is nothing on earth that cannot be explained simply. That little note that I sent to you today about reminding you of today took me almost an hour to write. Why? Because I deleted all the hard words. And then I went back to the simple message and I said, what do they want to hear? Because the simpler it is, the longer it takes to write. And you all know that, you writers here.
Right. Thank you very much. The next segment is the need for poets. And I'm going to make this to the point. The heart has its reasons. which reason ignores. Take that in. The heart has its reasons, which reason ignores. January 1973, the president of Lions International, Mr. George Fredericks, paid a visit to General Secretary Kurt Waldheim and offered the United Nations the cooperation of his organization on global issues such as environment, the world's handicap, and the international drug problem. Robert goes on to explain and highlight an example of how it was Sweden, I think it was, where they protected a lake and preserved this lake. And this is before scientific exploration or calculations or climate issues were known and shown, but it was by a poet who brought the inspiration of the beauty of the lake, of the wonder that it holds, the importance in their life. And through this poet's inspiration, they had built a whole system around the lake, which then saved it years before there was the imperative of the scientific knowledge about preservation and about the restoration of saving this lake. The point here, and I think this is so important in many ways, he's basically saying that poets and artists are essential in our life. And how many times in our conferences, in the events, it's very intellectual, it's very numbers are scientific driven and so on. And just saying that is the heart, again, he's always coming back to the heart, coming back to that level of consciousness, that level of our life is essential. So, Joanne.
No, I just am saying, sorry, I have to leave, and I really regret it.
Well, we're going to miss you. See you next time
Yes,
on the night.
Yes. I saw a hand. Penny?
Yes, thank you. This was my absolute favorite part of the entire book, because I've grown up with poets and artists of every type from my family, past and present. And I have to say, there's a quality that comes from the harmony, from the creativity and inspiration, from that emotion that whether they're expressing beauty and joy or really rage and anger, it's felt. You can see it, you can sense it, you can have compassion for it. And I think when you paint a picture with words or with art of any type, you express that collective humanity can feel it. And that's what I totally agree. In almost every capacity, if we could put artists in some way, in some measure of respect within the decision-making bodies of any type of political or other organizations, we'd see tremendous difference, because they speak a different language. It is totally from the heart and the feeling center. And again, music is absolutely the key, because we now know it doesn't train the brain, it doesn't train the heart, it can change absolutely the mood almost instantaneously. And with that, you can change an entire audience to be willing to open that space right then and there. So I really love this section. It's my favorite of the whole book. And I admire these men for coming together with it. Thank you.
Beautiful. Well said. Well said. Thank you very much. Other thoughts?
Thank you very much, Penny. I'll just bounce off of that. I so agree, and it actually reminds me, as I mentioned earlier, being an educator in the 70s, when liberal arts were taken from the curriculum. No more music, or reduced art. And I can see that impact by the sharing that you just gave. It's sad, however, we can turn things around. We can do this.
And I have to read a comment from Des that Robert was interviewed by Chantel, an hour interview from about a 4-hour taping that was edited down and now is available. So be sure you look in the chat so you can see that episode 7 of The Visioneers includes this magnificent interview with Robert, where all of the words that he has written are in this hour. Believe it or not, he's able to do that. And then one other update, my IT person has fallen in love with AI, and he took all Robert's poems. Imagine this: Robert, decide to be healthy, decide to be happy, decide to be the good news, decide to be optimistic. They're all on peacepodcast.org. All you do is scroll over them and a voice comes on and it tells you what this poem says. So if you have visually challenged friends who can't see because they have macular degeneration or something else, send them to peacepodcast.org and listen to the poems. They are so beautiful.
Right. Barb.
I don't know. Let's see. I don't know if I can pull this off, but I have a son who is an artist. And for years, I've been so frustrated that our society doesn't support artists, because I think when they paint, they go into their studios by themselves and they really get in touch with their heart. And I have interviewed 60 women all over the world about their peacemaking. And this is a painting he did when he was in high school, when he knew I was doing that. He
I
came
see it behind you.
Yeah, that's what I don't know. I'm hoping you can see it.
Yes.
It looks, people go like, this is such a dark picture. Why do you put this up in your office? And I said, because this is the essence of the women peacemakers that I interviewed. I don't know if you can tell, but right there, the heart of this dark form is red.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I said, this painting kept me going through the entire set of interviews of 60 women and the creation of the book about women peacemakers, what we can learn from them. I just wish we were supporting our artists so they could go in their studios and let their hearts pour out, instead of also having to, take classes in how to work computers or be waiters or anything like that. I so agree with this being my favorite chapter in the whole book. So
Beautiful. Great. Thank you very much. Appreciate that. Well said. Well, let us move ahead. The next chapter is Public Assaults on Alcohol. And I'm just going to say, nothing is more apt to contribute to human happiness than abstention from alcohol. And I'm going to go to the bottom line here, where he says, Casals, like many great men in this world, had discovered the secret of secrets, namely that each human life is a miracle, unique, unrepeatable prodigy in the universe. And like Thant, he drew this sacred conclusion: humans should never destroy or diminish life, neither their own nor that of their brothers and sisters. So the part of the story is that Public Assault could not have alcohol. And that was the learning here, that not doing anything that is diminishing of life or destroying it or damaging, and in personal life as well as life of others and also in the world. Any thoughts on this one?
I went to dinner with David at a very important conference. I took him to dinner. I drank alcohol. David didn't. And I thought, man, if he can't drink alcohol, if he can drink alcohol and he's brilliant, I'm going to stop drinking alcohol. Well, that lasted 3 days. But those 3 days, I got so much done. I only drink, as I say to my son, honey, I only drink a half a glass of wine. Yes, I know, Mom. But anyway, your turn, Barb.
Oh, not mine.
Oh,
okay.
Hands up.
Lower your hand, please.
Oh,
All
I will.
right.
Thank you.
But this alcohol is a very interesting thing, because Robert wasn't a pure either. He would go for 2 weeks and then he'd have a glass of wine and I'd join it. So, alcohol has its place. But in Pablo Casal's life, his hands did not function when he drank. And he would still continue to drink until his wife put her foot down. Sometimes alcohol has to be made a sin in a way that's weird. It affects your heart or it affects your fingers or something. And in this case, I remember Robert saying he was the most brilliant pianist that he ever heard. But when he drank, he couldn't play 3 words, 3 sentences. He couldn't even do a few notes. And so his wife said, you can't do that. And he lived a long life. So you must know that we are all miracles. And I'll never forget when Einstein invited, he had to wait long times to talk to Einstein. And finally, this woman got in there. She says, oh, I'm so excited to be here. Can I smoke? You're going to smoke with the perfectly beautiful body you have? You're going to put smoke into that miracle? And she said, well, I was going to, but now I won't. But when you think about it, what we do to this miracle of a body that we have, and I'm looking at Rosemary, look at that beautiful body. She only has a necklace because Costa Rica is warm and it makes you glow. I know. And I'm looking at you, Jim, you're glowing. Your turn.
Oh, just a quick story about Pablo Casals. I was with the Phoenix Symphony in 71 when Pablo Casals was still at his end, but still playing. He hobbled out on stage at that point because he was almost 90 at that point. He hobbled out and all crippled with arthritis. And somebody carried his cello out for him. He sat in that chair. They handed him the chair. He became another individual instantly. It was just unbelievable.
Wow.
And while I was standing there, it was one of the most magnificent experiences I'd seen. Hobbled out, somebody carried his instrument out, put it in his hand, and he became another individual. God bless the arts.
Yeah, absolutely. Excellent. Moving on to the next section, which is my lamborghini. Does anyone know what that is? So this is the reference here is to, this is Albert Schweitzer's hospital where he created this in Africa. It was it's in Gabon now, but it was French Equatorial Africa, I think, in 1913. That was his home until he died in the 50s. But that is a reference here. That was his sanctuary. That was his home. That was so important to him. Albert Schweitzer. So that's the reference. To be faithful to your love, and you will, be faithful to your love, and you will be compensated beyond measure. Given our time, what would anyone like to say about this? And actually, I'll go right to one of the sections that I have here. I stayed my lamborghini of sorrows and pains in the great house of hope for humanity, faithful to my peace-serving job, and I remained forever grateful to Norman Cousins for the confidence he had placed in me at the moment when I needed it most. Basically, what happened here, when Norman Cousins came to Robert with the offer of being the editor of, I think it was the World magazine, and this was, but you'd have to leave the UN. And so this is a great trial for Robert making the choice of be more money, etc. But he ultimately chose no. He had to stay with the United Nations. This is his life. This is his dedication, and this is his lamborghini, as Albert Schweitzer had dedicated his life to that of service and of humanity. Richard.
Well, Albert Schweitzer was my mentor, or one of my mentors, and I felt that reading Schweitzer's story of him working in Africa, that I should do the same. But I felt that by coming to Northern Ontario, I could be in an underserviced area here and work here just as well. I think my Lamborghini is a couple of things come to mind. One is that you need to have a goal. And for Robert, his goal was the United Nations. His home was the United Nations. And it amazes me, you talk to a refugee who walks, 1,000 kilometers or miles carrying their dying son, and the son may die en route. And then what do? They simply turn around and go back home where the trouble began in the first place. And I'm going, what? And I think this power of home is a very powerful thing. And I think that what we now find is that, people are, I think it's great to be patriotic of your home, to praise the beauty of your home, but not to the point of nationalism, saying that my home is better than your home. And I think that's a big difference that many people don't quite grasp. So I think it's great to, one, to have a goal in a place and to call that home, but not to say that it's better than somebody else's home.
That's well said, Richard. Because Robert always felt that the home is where the heart is. And I think sometimes now today, the home is spreading. We're having more homes in different countries and things. And that could be the problem and it could be the solution. But when Norman Cousins asked Robert to lead the United Nations, he said, I cannot. I have to work for peace. I was brought here because I won an essay contest. The next chapter about Mazzoni, the faith of a great artist, is so profound. It goes right back to what Barb said about the arts, because when he saw this statue of Jesus in a window in a New York art store, he said, who did that? He went into the art store and he said, who sculptured that beautiful picture or the statue of Jesus on the cross? And they said, oh, that's our artist Mazzoni. And so Robert started collecting Mazzoni art. And when I started dating Robert or going with Robert, he had Mazzoni make a bust of me. And I'm thinking, a bust of me? And there it was. I had this copper or whatever it was. Bust is this big, and he had him do Eleanor Roosevelt. He had him do Gandhi. He had him do Sasakawa. Where are these statues today? In the garden at the University for Peace, to live beyond Mazzoni, to live beyond Robert. When you go to the University for Peace, and I'm not sure, Rosemary, if it's all there still, but there's a little circle when you first enter, and there's Gandhi in this circle. Then you go through the park and there's Eleanor Roosevelt. And so you see, he believed that we become more of who we are when we are remembered after we're gone, which is another thing that didn't come through yet in this chapters. But after we're gone, well, I guess it did, because it came through. How do you want to be remembered, right? That was in some of these chapters. So anyway, that's just so interesting about the artists and what they leave beyond their lifetime.
Right, absolutely. Well, let's move on to Uncle Sylvian Block. I think you go right to the ending here. It says, I was rewarded beyond measure for the little effort I made to place myself in his position and for having talked to him about the only sensible subject that had any meaning to him, the old country. Words of an American Indian prayer came back to my mind. Great Spirit, grant that I may not judge my neighbor until I have walked a mile in his moccasins. So he assisted this gentleman who was dying, and Queen of the Great not accepting any medical intervention or assistance. And it was wondering, what can they do to be here with him, be present with him, to assist in any way? And it was to bring him back to, and again, he put himself into his shoes, into his situation. It was bringing him back to memories of his home, of his ancestral
Younger
home.
years. Yeah.
And so it brought him peace. Mr. Block brought him peace so he could pass in peace. And so then again, it's about stepping into someone's shoes to really understand them and really have compassion for them. Barb.
I was impressed by the fact that Robert transferred himself into Uncle Block's world so thoroughly that Uncle Block thought he was Jewish. that was a real transfer and letting go of who Robert was and getting into his thing. And then I thought, that's quite a talent, quite a skill.
What did Robert say? The highest compliment he could have gotten was that statement.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So.
Right, exactly. So
and I
again,
also love the fact that he helped him transfer from being mad at dying to being peaceful at dying. And the phrase that I so love that he wrote, he said, Uncle Sylvan looked suddenly tired and weak. He gave me his hand in a soft, abandoned way.
yeah.
Who would ever think about a hand transferring abandonment? It's just beautiful, I think. So.
Yeah, for sure. So, all right, moving to the last section, cousin Martha. Barbara, would you like to close this out?
This was probably one of my favorite chapters. Why? So many of my friends are not well. And I keep telling them, go to page 167 and read how cousin Mark was able to overcome her illnesses. And I remember him talking about that she was going to leave her body to science because science was going to have the best time figuring out how she lived with one eye, a new hip, half of a heart, a pacemaker, and all the things. But when you talk to her, Robert would tell me, she would say, I'm fabulous. And then one day he went to her and he said, well, why did you have a heart attack if you're so fabulous? That was the day I sat in the kitchen and cried for hours about losing my husband. And I let my body go back to the pain of losing him, and the future without him made me cry harder. That's when I had the heart attack. And now I know I'm done with that. And now I can will my body to be healthy again. And she lived many years past that, but she willed her life to be happy again. And the minute she went into the pain, that's when the heart said, oh, maybe you're done. And Robert would tell me that story. He would say, every time I wanted to be happy about whatever was coming to me that wasn't exactly the right health for me, I would remember cousin Mark. And she was something. That's all I can say is how many times I have given this to people, because this is the statement that hit me. From a friend who is a neurologist, I learned that the human brain is the last organ of the body to age. And it becomes apparent, and you will see that over a person's lifetime, as your life becomes more diversified and the finer chains of neurons go in. And so I was talking to my granddaughter yesterday and I said, Sophie, do you know you're pretty smart? And she's a straight A student. She said, yeah, I think, she's very humble. And I said, I think these video games have created more neurons in your brain, because the neurons are what keep all of the functioning of ideas flowing and getting stronger and having more. And I said, then I told her about cousin Mark. And the mysterious keys that switch on and command our physical and mental being to be in harmony. When my kids were little, and you already probably did this too, I didn't let my kids watch TV because I didn't want them to have the neurons stop being developed, because that's the syntax that they are brought into this world with. And it's probably more than synapses, you know, the synapses of the brain connecting, all of that gets put on hold when they're watching TV all the time. Anyway, this book is Robert's way of saying, thank you for giving me the life I had. This is his way of saying thank you. And if you can learn, and he would tell me, if they can learn anything from this book, I would be so grateful, because I learned so much from the people in my life. And I remember him saying to me that this book was going to be, at his age of 82, I am very moved and excited that most of all they taught me happiness is being republished. It is my greatest wish that these stories will inspire readers to be aware of all their blessings and to work for the happiness of others. All of us can decide to apply our talents, passion, and energy to cultivating the welfare of all living beings. And here's what he wrote in his own handwriting at the bottom. It says, I should no longer read other books except this happiness book. Close all the others forever. I am more than 85 years old, and it's July 15th, 2008 in Santa Barbara, California. And these words ring true for me today as they did when I wrote them before 1978. So with that, David, I don't know how to thank you for what you did today, because you took each of these beautiful stories and chapters and brought them to life. And then you heard from us. And I want to thank you for that. You are Robert, because he would always want to say something and then he would ask, what do you think? What do you think was very important to him? And so with that, I thank you for joining us on this wonderful exploration of how others influenced Robert. Some people would say, how did you find him? How did you find Robert? You were living in Santa Barbara. He was living in Costa Rica. What was the magic? And I could tell you how it happened, but basically I had a dream that I would marry a peacemaker, somebody who was working on the world at the top of the world level. And I didn't know what I was wanting in 1990, but I knew I wanted to fulfill my grandfather's dream, who said it when I was 3, you're going to be a peacemaker. And I was working hard for peace. I was on La Casa de Maria board for 25 years. I was doing retreats. I was an educator. I was a PR lady. I knew you had to sell benefits for people to pay attention to you. But today that Robert came to La Casa, because I said to the board, where do world leaders go to heal? We were healing everybody in Santa Barbara and all around, but where do world leaders go? And he was one of the world leaders that showed up. And I still get chills telling you this, because he was this short, stocky man with beautiful, clear blue eyes and wavy gray hair and a mesomorphic body, strong and brilliant. And then I heard him speak at the Libero Theater. I am still getting chills remembering that night as I sat there and Robert played his harmonica and he told us how important each of us are. And that we are the solution to today's issues. We are here because we were meant to be here now. And I leave this Santa Barbara with joy in my heart for having met you and for meeting Barbara, who will soon be the love of my life. I did not know he was going to say that. I did not know he was going to play his harmonica, the Ode to Joy. All I know is he got the 5th standing ovation in 30 years at the Libero Theater. That's the man who you have read today. He could speak the language you needed to hear at that moment. Right, Sandy Hinden? Right, everybody who has met Robert? Now, why was David so profound today? He knew Robert. He worked with Eamon Madison and Robert at the United Nations. Why is Jerry and Des so profound about Robert? They knew Robert. They brought us to Vancouver. We spoke to hundreds of high school and juniors and grade school children. They had the wisdom to share Robert with the future generations. And I thank each of you for your wisdom. You're brilliant. And Diane, when Robert had a little bit of Alzheimer's at the end, I dropped Robert off to be with Diane because they went to Peru together. Each of you have such a story to tell. And she would take him to the beach at La Jolla, and they would go to Scripps Institute and they would see the fish. And Robert would become alive with the underworld. This is Diane. And then I would have a few hours of peace and quiet because I didn't have to take care of Robert anymore. Now, Robert was perfect. He always loved me and I always loved him. And then everything happens for a reason. That's all I can say. And so at the end of his beautiful life, when we were together, and sometimes all we could do was sit and hold hands because he just didn't want me to lose track of me. So I sit down, we watched every Hallmark movie and held hands because that's what he wanted. And if he wanted to walk outside, that's what we did, because I knew someday we would be hearing the words that he wrote. And today was that day. So with that, I thank you. David, you were fabulous. We all love you. And we appreciate letting you ask us how we felt about these chapters. Each of you, I look at you and I think, oh my gosh, are we lucky you're here today? And are we lucky you're on the planet? Anybody have a final comment? If I was a computer whiz like my grandchildren, I'd be playing the Ode to Joy here because it's so beautiful. I could go, oh, share screen. No, that's not me. But anyway, I want you all to know that Sandy is the reason we get these beautiful images that he puts together. So on July 9th, I hope to see you at 9 o'clock, July 9th at 9, and we're going to finish up. Oh, what is this chapter's called? It's called My Lessons from the United Nations. Ambassador Chadre and myself will take you through those chapters. Bless you. Keep your faith in the future of our planet. And remember, as this reader wrote to Robert one time, I have applied your philosophy in your book. Most of all, they taught me happiness in the worst circumstances for a woman. I was happily married to a man I loved very much. We had 4 children, lived in a nice house. He became rich and famous, and he became a sweetheart to another woman. But I wasn't going to let him ruin my happiness. I just pretended it never happened, and I never talked about it. I kept the family together. It didn't change my attitude toward him. I sought greater happiness from my children, my home, and my friends. Several years have passed, and very honestly, I can say that I never regretted my decision. Nobody can take my happiness away from me. Amazing. In this book that Robert cut out from a letter that somebody sent to him, I have these treasures. Sometimes I wonder, what am I supposed to do with all these miraculous treasures? You are what I'm doing with them. Thank you.
Thank you.
And save the 3 dots. You'll be able to hear later, read this chat that came in. Thank you. Thank you. Okay, bye for now and peace.